Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à Wild Homestead. Welcome to this 100 acres of paradise here in Ontario, Canada. I just signed a conditional offer to buy this property. It's 100 acres. We have 30 days to make up our mind. To buy this property, we would have to sell our existing one. Why on God's green earth would I want to sell my current 40-acre property, which is gorgeous, and come move to another property, this 100-acre property? The answer is family. My current property is almost more than a full day's drive away. I basically am seeing my parents once every 5 months, I think. This property is 3 hours from my family in Southern Ontario. This is right outside of Algonquin Park. And if I continue to build my homestead on my current property and raise a family there, my grandkids are basically going to grow up never seeing their grandparents. I am going to live the rest of my life basically never seeing my parents. You know, my parents are in their late 60s, and the average lifespan in Canada is 80. If I moved here, I could see my family. My grandkids could see my family every weekend, potentially. That is an enormous factor. The major problem, and it's a big problem with this property, is that it is in an organized township. I will explain what this property is. I will show it to you visually and verbally. I will tell you the pros and the cons of it, and then I will seek your advice at the end before wrapping up. So here we go, Wild Homestead episode 59, an introduction to this high-risk, high-reward opportunity that we have before us. Whoa! First sip. Everybody knows the rules. So what is this 100-acre property exactly? First of all, I'll give you the what of the ecology. It's split by a river. There's 20 acres on one side, there's 80 acres on the other. I'd say it's mainly hardwoods. It's probably 60% hardwoods, 40% softwoods, which is very nice. There's lots of good construction material. There's also lots of oak trees and beech trees and maple trees. So it's very nice forested land. I've seen, while scouting this property and in the area, I've seen 2 moose, I've seen white-tailed deer, I've seen a bear, wild turkey. From a financial perspective, this property, even though it's about double the size of our current property, it's actually pretty affordable. This is a property that has never been listed on the open market. It's through a private sale, someone that I know in my personal network, and it's been in their family for a long time, and we can basically get it for a very kind of favorable rate, well below market rate. So from a financial perspective, we'd have to sell my current property, but to buy this, we could definitely afford it, and we'd probably have a little bit of money left over, to be honest, but you'd need it because of the next piece, which is the regulatory situation. So we'd need a building permit. To build a house on this property, the building permit would be about $800 or $1,000. The building would need to be inspected, and we can only build a house on the 20-acre side of the property. The 80 acres, the problem with the 80 acres is that there's no road that abuts it. It's surrounded basically by Crown land. There's an access road from the north into this 80 acres that I'm sitting on right now. And the issue with that is, to get permission to get a permit over here, we would need to apply to the township. And it's not 100%. It's probably a high probability, but it's not 100% we would get a permit to build anything over here. And if we could get a permit, it'd be for a house that's only up to 750 square feet, which is still sizable, right? That's much bigger than our current cabin we have, but it wouldn't be a full-size house. So the other issues is, yes, you're going to be inspected by a building inspector. You have to get a stamped engineered plan to do so from an engineering firm. They charge $1.50 per square foot in this area of central Ontario, and there's a minimum charge of $3,000 though. So it'd be $3,000 for the engineering plans to get the permit in the first place. The other regulatory issue is you have to get your lumber stamped by the provincial authority. You can't just mill a log and use it. You have to mill it, and then it has to be stamped by the provincial authority. I've spent many hours talking to these folks on the phone, and I actually think it's easier than I previously thought. It costs about $700 to have the grader come out to your site for a day. And in a day, they can absolutely do, he said, for like one log cabin, it'd probably take a half day's work. And they literally go through and they grade all your lumber. And from his description of it, like, there's a pretty high pass rate, as long as there's no, major mold or fungus problems or big cracks in your timber. But again, it is another regulatory hurdle of potentially, buying this property.
Look at this creek. That's cool. Hillside, whoa. Is that fir? Guys, I think that's either a deer bedding or moose bedding, or it's a kill site. That looks like bone. Oh, bro. Holy.
So how would we do it? If we sold our current property, how would we approach, developing this property into a homestead? The key challenge is that it's split by this river into 20 acres and 80 acres. We have to build on the 20-acre side. Most of the nice, big, thick stands of pine, like we have this big, thick stand of pine right here, that would be amazing for milling and construction, is on the 80-acre side. So what I think I would do is I'd come into the 80-acre side first. I would build a small cabin. I'd mill up lumber, because on this side in Ontario, the good news is you can build accessory buildings, they call them, up to 10 by 16 feet or 12 by 12, 13 by 13 feet, up to 160 square feet without a permit. So we could build a small cabin, roughly the size of our current cabin, get that up as fast as possible. And my objective would be to build the foundation and get up the walls and the roof on the main house, which would be on the 20-acre side on a build site overlooking that river. We would have to bring in some kind of driveway, at least partially, and that would be the rush, is like in the first year, is get up that house. I would build a 20 by 40 foot house, and I would build it in a way that is easy to expand it in the future if we want to add more room, because getting up a nice structure that we can live in on that side and, you know, get married and start having some military grade babies, I think that that is a good objective. So milling, I think, will make things faster. We're probably going to need machinery to do it. We're going to need a tractor for sure. So that is what we would do if we moved here. So it looks like, guys, on this rapids, the side where we can build a home, it starts to get very steep over here. So basically, I think a rational home build site is probably from this rapids down. So this here is another place we could build, in this gully here. It's pretty flat. And then boom, you can see that island down there. You can see all the creek. This is another big old flat build site overlooking the river. Here's another build site. It's actually 115 feet, is like kind of down here. It's pretty flat. It's much flatter in this area. You see it's relatively flat. I think it'd be relatively easy to do a foundation here. Now this is a good one. So this one has higher elevation. It's relatively flat right here, and this is 120 feet down to the creek, and because you're up high, you can see a huge section. So if you selectively harvest, thinned out the trees, you could see a huge section of the creek right from the cabin windows. And this, finally, I believe is build site 5. There's a slope to a back. That's about 115, 120 pros and cons of this property. Number one con right now is, can we get an approved building site overlooking the river? I'm meeting with the surveyor next week, and we are looking specifically, because we have to be 115 feet back from the side of the river to build. So I have to triply make sure we can get a building permit in a spot where we can actually be close to the river. Because if we're too far from the river, then this entire property doesn't make sense. What's the point in having a property with a river if you can't live and look at it, you know, every day of your life? So that's con number one, is the uncertainty around the build site. Con number two is, can we get a building permit for a small home on this side? It might take months to find out whether we can get the permit from the township to do so. And it may turn out that the township would never give a permit on this 80 acres. And one of the reasons why this property is very economically priced, one, because it's not being sold on the open market, but two, because technically speaking, only 20 acres of this 100 acres is technically livable right now, in terms of you can actually get a legal permit to build a home on. We can always build, you know, little 10 by 16 foot structures over here, even if it gets denied. But that's a major con, is the uncertainty around being able to build on this 80 acres. Con number three is the general uncertainty with building in a organized township. I know what is required to build in an unorganized township, where we have been building for the last year and a half on Wild Homestead. A organized township is a totally new beast. There's added complexity, there's potentially added time, there's potentially added costs of going through. Now, in my initial due diligence, it doesn't seem that the costs and complexities are a game killer. Like the permit for $800, you know, the survey of the build site, I think, is going to be $2,000. and I believe like the legal fees to close the deal are $1,500. What else would there be? To get the lumber stamped, it's $700. So none of these things in and of themselves are outrageously expensive. They're not going to kill us. The fourth and final con of this property, I would say, is the fact we're going to need machinery. There's a few trails on this side of the property where the trail comes in from the north through Crown Land, but there's absolutely no trails that go right over to where the river is, right over to where our potential build site is. So not only are we going to be doing a lot of forestry work, harvesting these logs and milling them and transporting to the build site, but like blazing these big new trails we're going to need to do on these 80 acres, we're going to need some kind of machinery. See, nice, all hardwoods on this ridge top here. Very nice, coming down lower, and then we're entering back into more coniferous trees, which are great for building. We just walked through a big patch of hardwoods. I don't know if you can see in the horizon, but we're on top of this ridge line here. And now we're walking back into a patch where we've got some trees, and you see these big, if I had to guess, I would say that they're white pines, but they're straight as straight can be, and they're giant. Like, this is perfect milling material for building. Do you see how big these guys are? What are the four pros of the property? The biggest one, closer to my family. I can actually spend this next decade with my parents, seeing them, maybe even every other weekend. They're only 3 hours away. My grandkids can grow up spending time with my parents, and my extended family, my cousins, my aunts, like everybody. That is massive. That is the number one reason why I have even spent all this time doing this due diligence and this searching for another piece of land, is for that. It's all about family. Pro number two, this is beautiful land. Arguably, this is much nicer land in terms of the kind of forest that's here, in terms of the quality of the river. It's all stone river, and there's no kind of like swampy areas next to the river that takes up a bunch of the land. It's bigger. It's 100 acres versus 40 acres. Technically, I think our current property is 45, so it's basically double the size. There's probably more hunting opportunities. We have fewer neighbors here, actually, than where our current property is. So it's bigger, there's more privacy, there's more space. Pro number four is that the challenge of building to code in a organized township is actually a good skill to have. It makes us me a better builder. I can't tell you the number of messages I get from people in the United States, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, in Germany, and in Sweden, people saying, "Man, I'd love to do what you're doing, but we can't build without permits where I live." Most of the world, you need to build to code. You need to build with permits. You need to build with building inspectors. To be honest, this could actually be much more, not only better for improve me as a builder, this could be much more relatable for everyone else out there. How do you build a log cabin and a homestead as economically as possible, as much DIY as possible, but doing it in an organized township, doing it with building permits and building inspections? That actually could be a much more interesting journey for the majority of the viewers out there as well. Look at this, guys. This whole cluster of young trees. It looks like, if I had to guess with how high these are, that a moose came along and just devoured them. It's like something clipped all of the shoots and the new growth off of all of these shrubs. Do you see this here? Like, look at that.
that definitely looks like deer poop. There's a big pile. That could be a big deer, probably a big deer. But seeing lots of poop everywhere. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is almost certainly moose poop. It's much bigger than the deer poop. It's the same kind of big round glossette looking things, but
So what am I thinking now in terms of what is the probability of actually doing this? Honestly, I'm about 60-40. I think it's going to happen. I want it to happen. I really do. The family thing is so important to me. But there's so many unknowns. The due diligence I'm doing now, next week, the week after, it's going to be make or break in terms of, is this feasible? I have an Excel sheet tracking all of the things that are going to be above and beyond what is required to build our home in the unorganized township where we currently are. It may just come to a situation where in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm like, the cost, the complexity, the time, it's too much. You know, keep searching for a property closer to my family, but we're just going to have to wait until we find something in a unorganized township. And it could take 2 or 3 years. What do you guys think? There's been a lot of people out there. I mean, you've spent so many hours with me. A lot of you guys probably know me better than a lot of my friends and extended family members, third cousins, whatnot. So, you know, from the pros and cons and the situation that I've laid out, what do you guys think about the move to this property? Let me know. I kind of like again, it's like a distributed decision-making mechanism, having all of these minds thinking about the same problem. So when will the next episode of Wild Homestead be? I think at the very latest, it would be May 31st in 3 weeks, because this is when the conditional offer expires. So I've got 2 weeks ahead of me of doing due diligence here. I got to do it. I hope you guys understand, because if we buy this property and sell our current one, and then we realize we've made a huge mistake, we're screwed, right? So there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of jeopardy in doing this. Have to make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted here. But you know what? I could find out on Monday again that there's a problem with the title. We can't do this. Or, you know what? There's a problem. We're going to have to build a foundation that costs $100. Like one thing that I'm learning about now is insulated concrete foundations. The structural engineer, he suggested I do an ICF. An insulated concrete foundation. You need a concrete truck. You could do it yourself, but he said it'd be very risky because if you make any mistakes, it won't pass inspection. And that's a foundation that'll probably cost $50,000. And it's like, ugh, that's a lot of money. It's like, we probably don't have the money to do that and do the permits, you know, get a tractor, do all that other stuff, right? So if we find out we need to do an ICF, and we can't do like poured concrete pilings, which I've already done and know how to do, that could be a game killer. I might find that out next Wednesday. So if we find out it's killed, I could be putting out a video, who knows, next week. We're back on our current land, full steam ahead. I think at the very latest, I will see you folks May 31st. May the gods bless you, both the old gods and the new, and look forward to your comments. Strength and honor. And guys, when the universe gives you a big opportunity that has a lot of potential rewards, but a lot of potential risks, there's only one thing you can say back to the universe. And it's the following 7 words and 19 syllables. Ooga.